When someone stops responding, it can trigger a whirlwind of emotions: confusion, frustration, even self-doubt. It's natural to wonder why the silence exists, or if you did something wrong. But here's a profound truth that many overlook. When someone withdraws or ceases communication, it's more a reflection of their own choices, priorities, and mindset than it is a commentary on your value as a person. This is a critical lesson in understanding the power of self-worth and emotional resilience. Your worth is innate, unchanging, and independent of external validation. It is not tied to how often someone texts back, how quickly they respond, or whether they even choose to respond at all. The moment you hinge your sense of value on the actions or inactions of another person, you give away your power. You hand over control of your emotional state to someone else. And that is a dangerous precedent to set. Remember, your sense of self-worth should come from within. It should be rooted in the knowledge of who you are, your values, your strengths, and the unique qualities you bring to the world. It is not something that fluctuates based on someone else's availability or interest. When faced with silence, it's tempting to overanalyze the situation. You might replay conversations in your mind, scrutinize your words, and try to identify the exact moment things changed. This habit, while common, is not productive. It traps you in a cycle of self-doubt and makes you believe that you are the problem. But here's the reality. Their silence is about them. It could stem from a myriad of reasons that have nothing to do with you. Stress, personal struggles, shifting priorities, or even a lack of emotional maturity on their part. None of these reasons are a reflection of your value or your worthiness as an individual. People often feel compelled to seek answers when faced with uncertainty. The silence can feel like a void that needs to be filled with explanations. But chasing after answers by asking, "Why aren't you responding?" or "Did I do something wrong?" often leads to further frustration. These questions place you in a position of vulnerability, signaling that your sense of peace depends on their response. This dynamic can erode your confidence and create an unhealthy imbalance in the relationship. Instead of seeking external answers, turn inward. Reflect on your feelings. Assess your boundaries and reaffirm your self-worth. It's also important to recognize that self-worth is not static. It's something you cultivate and nurture over time. This process requires intentional effort. It means setting boundaries and honoring them, even when it feels uncomfortable. It means refusing to settle for less than you deserve, even when it's tempting to lower your standards for the sake of connection. It means treating yourself with kindness and compassion. It means treating yourself with kindness and compassion, especially during moments of self-doubt. A powerful aspect of self-worth is the ability to walk away from situations that do not serve your highest good. Walking away doesn't always mean cutting ties or ending relationships. Sometimes it simply means stepping back, giving space, and focusing on yourself. It's about reclaiming your energy and redirecting it toward your growth and well-being. When someone stops responding, it's an opportunity to practice this. Instead of trying to bridge the silence, allow yourself to sit with it. Let it be a reminder that your peace and happiness are not contingent on anyone else. One of the most liberating realizations is that you don't need anyone else to validate your feelings, choices, or existence. This is a cornerstone of self-worth, knowing that you are enough as you are without external affirmation. When you internalize this truth, you become less affected by the actions of others. Silence no longer feels like a personal rejection. It simply becomes a neutral event, one that does not diminish your value or derail your sense of self. Cultivating self-worth also involves surrounding yourself with people and experiences that uplift and affirm you. It means choosing relationships that are reciprocal, where your energy and efforts are matched. It means engaging in activities that bring you joy and fulfillment, independent of anyone else's involvement. When you build a life that is rich and meaningful on its own, you are less likely to be shaken by the absence or silence of another person. Lastly, self-worth is about perspective. In moments of silence, it's easy to focus solely on what's missing, but shifting your perspective can change everything. Instead of dwelling on their absence, think about what their silence creates space for. More time for self-reflection, personal growth, and the pursuit of your passions. Consider what this situation is teaching you about yourself, your needs, and your boundaries. Every experience, even one as seemingly insignificant as unanswered messages, carries a lesson if you're willing to look for it. The journey to self-worth is not always straightforward, but it is transformative. It requires patience, self-awareness, and a willingness to prioritize your well-being above the need for external validation. When someone stops responding, let it be a reminder, not of what you lack, but of the strength and value you already possess. Silence often feels uncomfortable, almost unbearable, especially when it comes from someone we care about or expect engagement from. It can stir up a range of emotions: confusion, anger, sadness, or even insecurity. Yet, silence has a language of its own, one that speaks louder than any words could ever convey. When someone stops responding, their silence carries a message, and it is up to us to interpret it wisely, without letting our emotions cloud our judgment or push us toward actions we might regret. The first thing to understand about silence is that it is deliberate. Whether intentional or not, it represents a choice on the part of the other person. It is not a random occurrence or something that happens accidentally. People communicate through their presence and absence, through their engagement and their withdrawal. When someone chooses not to reply, they're expressing something, perhaps their disinterest, their confusion, their need for space, or even their inability to handle the situation. Regardless of their reasons, their silence is telling you something important. It is crucial to pay attention to this message without rushing to fill the void with assumptions or desperate attempts to elicit a response. Many people feel an overwhelming urge to confront silence with questions. Why are you ignoring me? Or what did I do wrong? While these questions seem logical, they often backfire. They place the questioner in a vulnerable position, exposing their insecurities and signaling a need for validation. This shift in power dynamics can be detrimental. The person who is silent is given the upper hand, while the one seeking answers appears desperate and emotionally dependent. Instead of breaking the silence, such questions can deepen the divide, making the silent party retreat further. Silence is not something to be battled with words. It is something to be understood and respected. One of the most challenging aspects of dealing with silence is resisting the temptation to respond emotionally. When faced with the absence of communication, it is easy to let frustration or fear take over. People might send multiple messages, call repeatedly, or post passive-aggressive remarks online, hoping to provoke a response. These actions, though understandable, often lead to more harm than good. They amplify the perceived power of the silent individual while diminishing the self-respect of the one seeking attention. Silence demands composure. It requires patience and the ability to sit with discomfort without letting it control your actions. Learning to interpret silence also involves recognizing its context. Silence does not always mean disinterest or rejection. It can signify many things: a moment of reflection, a need for space, or an internal struggle unrelated to you. However, it is not your responsibility to decipher or fix someone else's silence. Their decision to withdraw is theirs to own, just as your reaction to it is yours to control. Instead of internalizing their silence as a personal failure or rejection, view it as a boundary they have set, consciously or unconsciously. Respecting that boundary demonstrates maturity and emotional intelligence. In many cases, silence is an opportunity for reflection. It creates a space for you to evaluate the dynamics of the relationship or situation. When someone stops responding, it might be a sign that the relationship is not as balanced or reciprocal as it should be. It forces you to ask yourself important questions. Am I overextending myself? Am I investing in a relationship that no longer serves me? Am I respecting my own boundaries and needs, or am I allowing someone else's behavior to dictate my worth? Silence can be a catalyst for these realizations, prompting growth and self-awareness. NSD vowels create antennas. Silence also serves as a mirror, reflecting our own fears and insecurities. Often, the discomfort we feel in the face of silence is not about the other person, but about what their silence triggers within us. It might awaken feelings of abandonment, unworthiness, or fear of rejection. Emotions rooted in past experiences rather than the current situation. Recognizing this can be liberating. It allows you to separate your internal struggles from the external circumstances, giving you the clarity to respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively. Another significant aspect of silence is its role in establishing boundaries. When someone stops responding, they are setting a boundary, whether consciously or not. It is not your place to push against that boundary or demand explanations. Instead, it is an opportunity to assess your own boundaries. How much effort are you willing to invest in a situation where communication is not reciprocated? How do you prioritize your own emotional well-being in the face of someone else's withdrawal? These are questions worth exploring during moments of silence. Silence, when viewed through the right lens, can be empowering. It teaches you to find strength within yourself rather than seeking it from others. It challenges you to confront your own thoughts and emotions without distraction. It reminds you that your worth is not tied to someone else's willingness to engage with you. Embracing silence as a natural part of relationships and life allows you to navigate it with grace and resilience. It becomes less of an obstacle and more of a teacher, guiding you toward deeper understanding and self-empowerment. You forgive. You release all preconceived notions of what people are. By respecting silence and understanding its significance, you reclaim your power. You no longer feel the need to chase answers or force communication. Instead, you recognize that silence is a choice, one that reveals more about the other person than it does about you. This perspective shift allows you to respond with dignity and self-assurance, maintaining your composure even in the face of uncertainty. Silence, when met with patience and self-respect, becomes less of a burden and more of an opportunity for growth and self-discovery. When communication ceases, one of the most critical reactions is restraint, resisting the temptation to overreach, over-explain, or over-apologize. It's a natural human response to want closure or clarity when someone becomes unresponsive. Silence often feels like a puzzle we're desperate to solve, and many instinctively reach for explanations by sending another text, making another call, or even attempting to apologize for things they're unsure they've done. Silence is the most critical reactions by sending another text, making another call, or even attempting to apologize for things they're unsure they've done. However, this approach, while well-meaning, often exacerbates the situation and places the seeker in an unnecessarily vulnerable position. Silence is powerful, and how you respond to it can dictate the dynamic moving forward. Over-apologizing or over-explaining when someone doesn't reply shifts the balance of power. The act of offering explanations for actions or words they haven't questioned subtly signals insecurity. It communicates a need for validation and approval, which, instead of drawing them closer, often pushes them further away. When you overextend in response to silence, you inadvertently diminish your own value in their eyes. It's not because you're unworthy, but because human nature tends to undervalue what is readily and excessively available. That's your vibe. In relationships, whether personal or professional, people are drawn to those who exude confidence and self-assurance. This doesn't mean you should become aloof or dismissive, but rather that you should maintain a sense of balance and perspective. When someone stops replying, it's not an automatic invitation to explain yourself. Often their silence has little to do with anything you've done. People have lives, challenges, and priorities that can momentarily or permanently shift their focus. Your responsibility is not to fill their silence with explanations, but to remain centered in your own truth. Over-explaining also creates a dynamic where you take on the burden of the entire relationship or conversation. By rushing to clarify or apologize, you're essentially saying, I'll do the emotional labor here. I'll make this easier for you. This dynamic is unsustainable and often breeds resentment in the long run. Healthy communication is a two-way street. And silence is sometimes an indication that the other party isn't willing or ready to engage in the way you desire. Collaboration. First and foremost, instead of overcompensating for their lack of effort, allow the relationship or interaction to reflect a balance of mutual respect and engagement. Another critical reason to avoid over-explaining is that it can lead to a loss of authenticity. When you try to explain your actions or words excessively, you risk diluting your original intentions. It's easy to fall into the trap of saying what you think the other person wants to hear rather than standing firm in your truth. This compromises your integrity and makes it harder to maintain healthy boundaries. Authenticity requires the courage to let silence linger without feeling compelled to fill it with justifications. Moreover, over-apologizing when silence is present can communicate guilt for something that may not even exist. Apologies are meaningful and necessary when you've genuinely made a mistake or caused harm. However, offering apologies simply to bridge a perceived gap in communication can weaken their impact. It's important to reflect on whether an apology is truly warranted. If you find yourself apologizing for your emotions, your boundaries, or your existence in someone's life, it's a sign that you're prioritizing their comfort over your own self-respect. Silence also provides an opportunity to assess your own motivations and reactions. Why do you feel the need to explain yourself? Is it because you're seeking closure, reassurance, or validation? Are you uncomfortable with the ambiguity that silence brings? These are important questions to explore, as they reveal deeper patterns in how you approach relationships and communication. Instead of immediately reacting to silence, take a step back and observe your feelings. Allow yourself to sit with the discomfort and use it as a tool for self-awareness and growth. Okay? It's also worth noting that not every silence requires a response. Sometimes silence is a boundary, and respecting it is the most mature and respectful course of action. By resisting the urge to explain yourself, you demonstrate a level of emotional intelligence and confidence that often earns respect, even if it isn't immediately visible. Silence, when met with composure and self-assurance, becomes a powerful statement in itself. It says, I respect your choice to step back, and I honor my own worth by not chasing explanations or validation. This restraint doesn't mean you ignore your own feelings or suppress your need for understanding. It's about recognizing that the answers you seek might not come from the other person. They come from within, through introspection, self-compassion, and a commitment to your own growth. When you refrain from over-explaining, you create space for the other person to reflect on their actions and decisions. You give them the opportunity to reach out on their terms, which is far more meaningful than a response elicited through pressure or guilt. The second is in the grander scheme of things, silence is not the enemy. It's a mirror. It reflects back to you your own insecurities, strengths, and patterns. By resisting the urge to explain yourself in the face of silence, you take back control of your narrative. You shift the focus from external validation to internal alignment. You allow yourself to remain whole and grounded, regardless of how others choose to engage with you. Silence becomes less of a challenge and more of a tool for growth and empowerment. When someone stops responding, the instinct to fill the void with questions often takes over. It feels natural to want answers, to understand why the communication has halted and what might have caused the shift. Questions like, why aren't you replying? Or did I do something wrong? Are often born from a place of vulnerability and uncertainty. These questions, however, carry implications that can unintentionally deepen the silence or strain the connection further. Understanding the dynamics behind this is essential to maintaining your dignity and self-respect in moments of emotional turbulence. The moment you ask someone why they aren't responding, you shift the dynamic of the interaction. It places you in a position of seeking validation, implying that their silence is something you need to fix or resolve. This inadvertently gives the other person power over your emotions and self-perception. It signals that their actions, or lack thereof, have the ability to destabilize you. While it's perfectly normal to feel unsettled by unanswered messages or unreturned calls, openly seeking explanations from the other person often leads to more harm than good. One of the main reasons asking these questions is counterproductive lies in their emotional undertone. A question like, why not you replying, may come across as accusatory, even if that's not your intention. The recipient may feel cornered or defensive, which could prompt them to withdraw even further. Silence often stems from personal reasons that have little to do with you: stress, preoccupation, or a need for space. By directly questioning their silence, you risk creating an emotional confrontation they may not be ready or willing to have. Stop. Furthermore, questions of this nature are often perceived as a reflection of insecurity. When you ask someone why they are not responding, it suggests that you are unsure of your own standing in the relationship or situation. It communicates a need for reassurance that they are still interested, invested, or present in your life. While vulnerability is a natural and human response, it is important to be mindful of how and when it is expressed. Allowing your insecurity to dictate your actions can weaken your emotional position and potentially lead to feelings of regret later. Another consequence of asking such questions is that it inadvertently shifts the focus away from the other person's silence and onto your emotional reaction. Instead of providing an opportunity for the person to explain or re-engage, it places the burden of managing your emotions onto them. This can feel overwhelming or even unfair, especially if they are navigating their own challenges or uncertainties. Relationships thrive on mutual respect and understanding, and respecting someone's need for silence, even if it feels uncomfortable, is a key component of that dynamic. A healthier approach to silence is to interpret it as a message rather than a void to be filled. Silence in its own way communicates boundaries. It suggests that the other person may need time, space, or emotional distance. Instead of seeking immediate answers, focus on respecting that boundary and reflecting on your own emotional responses. What is their silence making you feel? Is it triggering past fears of abandonment or rejection? Recognizing these patterns within yourself allows you to address them independently, without placing the responsibility on the other person. It's also important to recognize that silence is not necessarily an indicator of disinterest or hostility. People process emotions and situations differently. Some individuals withdraw when they are overwhelmed or uncertain, while others require solitude to reflect. Asking why they aren't responding might disrupt this process, preventing them from coming back to the interaction with clarity or a renewed sense of engagement. That by refraining from immediate questioning, you give the other person the space they need to navigate their own emotions and experiences. The need to ask why often stems from a desire for closure. Humans are naturally wired to seek understanding, to make sense of the gaps in communication or connection. However, closure is not always something the other person can provide. Sometimes, closure comes from within, from accepting the uncertainty, letting go of the need for immediate resolution, and trusting that time will bring clarity. By resisting the urge to ask questions, you demonstrate emotional resilience and confidence, qualities that strengthen your sense of self-worth regardless of the outcome. If you can control your emotions, you can control your thoughts. If you can control your thoughts, you can control. Additionally, silence is an opportunity to reevaluate the balance of the relationship. Are you investing more effort into communication than the other person? Are you respecting your own boundaries? Or are you overextending in an attempt to keep the connection alive? These are critical questions to consider during moments of silence. Instead of focusing on the absence of their response, shift your attention to your own needs, desires, and emotional well-being. This perspective empowers you to maintain your dignity and self-respect, even in the face of uncertainty. Silence can be a powerful teacher if you allow it to be. It challenges you to sit with discomfort, to resist the urge for instant gratification, and to find strength within yourself. The choice to not ask questions like, "Why aren't you replying?" is an act of self-respect. It communicates that you value yourself enough to not chase after answers or validation. It allows you to remain grounded and composed, sending a clear message that your worth is not tied to someone else's engagement or approval. By navigating silence with patience and understanding, you create space for growth both within yourself and within the relationship or interaction. You demonstrate that you are not driven by fear or insecurity, but by a deep sense of self-awareness and confidence. This approach not only preserves your emotional well-being, but also fosters a deeper level of mutual respect in your connections. Silence when met with grace and self-assurance, becomes less of an obstacle and more of an opportunity for transformation. When communication halts and someone stops replying, a natural inclination is to interpret their silence as an open-ended question. You begin to replay every interaction, every word spoken or written, in an effort to pinpoint what went wrong or why they have withdrawn. This mental spiral often leads to a trap, an urgent need to fix the situation by overcompensating. And you might feel the urge to write longer messages, attempt to bridge the gap with more frequent communication, or even try to win back their attention through grand gestures. These actions, while rooted in good intentions, tend to have the opposite effect. They push the person further away and diminish your own sense of self-worth. Overcompensation arises from a deep-seated need to feel in control of the situation. When someone goes silent, it's easy to feel powerless or rejected, and the mind instinctively looks for ways to regain footing. This often takes the form of excessive effort, whether it's through texts, calls, or even actions meant to demonstrate your value. But in relationships, romantic, platonic, or professional, balance is key. When one person starts to overcompensate, the equilibrium shifts and the dynamic becomes unhealthy. The effort you put forward to re-engage someone who has disengaged not only amplifies their detachment, but also signals desperation, a quality that undermines your value. Another important aspect of overcompensation is its effect on your emotional energy. When you overextend yourself in an attempt to revive communication, you drain your mental and emotional reserves. Every unanswered message, every ignored call becomes a source of anxiety and self-doubt. You begin to question your worth, wonder if you are enough, and blame yourself for their silence. This self-inflicted emotional turmoil erodes your confidence and leaves you feeling exhausted and defeated. In trying to fix the situation, you inadvertently create a cycle of emotional dependency that is difficult to break. It's also crucial to understand that overcompensating shifts the focus of the interaction. Instead of allowing the other person to space to process their own feelings or decisions, you place yourself at the center of the narrative. This can come across as controlling or intrusive, even if your intentions are pure. People value their autonomy and the freedom to choose when and how they engage. By overcompensating, you risk encroaching on their boundaries, which can lead to further withdrawal or even resentment. Relationships thrive when both parties feel respected and empowered to communicate on their own terms. Overcompensation also sends a subconscious message about your belief in your own worth. When you try too hard to earn someone's attention or approval, you're essentially saying that your value depends on their response. This mindset is not only disempowering, but also unfair to yourself. You are inherently valuable regardless of how others choose to engage with you. Allowing someone's silence to dictate your actions or self-perception gives them more power over your emotions than they deserve. True self-worth comes from within, from recognizing that your value is not contingent upon external validation. So, additionally, overcompensating often leads to miscommunication and misunderstanding. In your eagerness to bridge the gap, you may overanalyze their silence, attributing meanings or intentions that may not exist. You might start assuming the worst, projecting your insecurities onto the situation, and reacting in ways that are out of alignment with your true self. This not only complicates the dynamic, but also creates unnecessary tension. Men. Now, also creates unnecessary tension. Silence is often less about you and more about the other person's internal state. Overcompensating by trying to force clarity or resolution rarely leads to the outcome you desire. There's also a psychological element to consider when it comes to overcompensation. People are drawn to what is confident and self-assured. When you overcompensate, you project a sense of insecurity, which can be unattractive and unappealing. Confidence, on the other hand, comes from restraint, from knowing when to step back and allow things to unfold naturally. By resisting the urge to overcompensate, you demonstrate emotional maturity and self-control. Show control. You send a message that you are comfortable with yourself and that your life does not revolve around someone else's engagement or approval. Overcompensating also prevents you from recognizing the lessons silence has to offer. When someone stops replying, it's an opportunity to step back and evaluate the relationship or interaction. Are you the only one putting in effort? Is this dynamic truly serving you? Are you honoring your own boundaries and emotional needs, or are you sacrificing them to keep the connection alive? These are important questions that often go unanswered when you're caught up in the cycle of overcompensation. Taking a step back allows you to gain clarity and make decisions that align with your values and well-being. Another factor to consider is that overcompensation can set a precedent in the relationship. If you consistently go out of your way to bridge gaps in communication, you establish a pattern where the other person becomes comfortable with giving less effort. This creates an imbalanced dynamic where you are always the one reaching out, apologizing, or making amends. Over time, this pattern can breed resentment and lead to a relationship that feels one-sided and unfulfilling. By resisting the urge to overcompensate, you set a standard for mutual respect and effort, ensuring that the relationship remains healthy and balanced. Finally, overcompensation robs you of the opportunity to focus on yourself. When you're consumed with trying to revive a connection, you neglect your own needs, goals, and well-being. You become so focused on what the other person is thinking or feeling that you lose sight of your own emotional landscape. Taking a step back from overcompensation allows you to redirect your energy towards self-care, personal growth, and the relationships that truly nurture and uplift you. It's a reminder that your worth is not defined by how much effort you put into someone who has chosen silence, but by how much effort you invest in yourself. When someone stops replying, silence often leaves a void that feels deeply uncomfortable. This void tends to ignite an array of emotions, confusion, anxiety, and even anger that compel you to seek closure. However, not every unanswered message or disengagement requires resolution on your part. In many cases, the desire for closure becomes a trap, leading you to chase answers that may never come, or worse, answers that do not serve your emotional well-being. Understanding that closure is not always necessary is a profound step toward reclaiming your peace of mind and emotional independence. Seeking closure often begins as an attempt to make sense of what feels like a personal rejection. The mind is naturally wired to seek patterns and explanations. When someone goes silent, it disrupts the flow of communication and creates an unresolved narrative. You may find yourself replaying past conversations, overanalyzing their behavior, or even second-guessing your own actions. You relieve and relieve and relieve, relieve and relieve. See, this obsessive need for clarity can become consuming, taking up mental and emotional energy that could be better spent elsewhere. In reality, the lack of response from the other person might have little to do with you and more to do with their own circumstances, insecurities, or emotional state. Step one of stepping into life. The pursuit of closure often leads to self-blame. You might internalize the silence, interpreting it as evidence that you've done something wrong or that you're not good enough. This mindset is not only damaging, but also unproductive. It shifts the focus from the broader picture of the relationship or situation to a narrow, self-critical perspective. Silence is often ambiguous. Trying to derive meaning from it can lead to assumptions that may be inaccurate or unfair to yourself. In many cases, the silence is not a reflection of your worth, but a testament to the other person's inability or unwillingness to communicate effectively. Closure, as it's commonly understood, is often an illusion. We tend to believe that if we can just get an explanation, an apology, or a reason, the emotional discomfort will disappear. But even when closure is offered, it doesn't always bring the peace we expect. Words can't always heal wounds or resolve feelings of loss, especially when those feelings run deep. True closure comes not from external explanations, but from internal acceptance. It's the ability to let go of the need for answers and instead focus on what you can control, your own emotions, actions, and choices and expectations. Because the moment you stop trying to control is the moment you remove the power of your soul. Waiting for closure can also prevent you from moving forward. When you fixate on understanding why someone has disengaged, you keep yourself tethered to the past. This attachment can hinder personal growth and delay the process of healing. By releasing the need for closure, you free yourself to focus on the present and the future. You open up space for new opportunities, relationships, and experiences that align with your values and aspirations. Letting go is not an act of weakness, but a demonstration of strength and resilience. It's also important to recognize that closure is a two-way street. For closure to be meaningful, both parties must be willing to engage in an honest and open dialogue. When someone stops replying, they have made a choice, whether intentional or not, to disengage. Attempting to force closure in such circumstances often leads to frustration and disappointment. It's a reminder that relationships, like conversations, require mutual effort and respect. If someone is unwilling or unable to provide closure, it's not your responsibility to extract it from them. Additionally, the need for closure can sometimes mask deeper insecurities or fears. Silence from someone else might trigger feelings of abandonment, rejection, or inadequacy that stem from past experiences. In these moments, the quest for closure becomes less about the present situation and more about addressing unresolved emotional wounds. Recognizing this connection allows you to approach the situation with greater self-awareness and compassion. Instead of seeking closure from others, you can focus on healing and strengthening your sense of self-worth. Releasing the need for closure also empowers you to reclaim your personal narrative. When someone goes silent, it's easy to feel as though they hold all the power in the situation. By letting go of the need for their explanation or validation, you take back control of your story. You decide how to interpret their silence and what meaning, if any, to assign to it. This shift in perspective allows you to move forward on your terms, rather than being held back by unanswered questions or unfulfilled expectations. Letting go of the need for closure also reinforces the importance of self-respect. When you repeatedly seek answers from someone who has chosen to disengage, you may unintentionally diminish your own dignity. Silence in itself is a form of communication, and it often speaks volumes about the other person's priorities, values, or emotional readiness. Choosing to respect their silence, and more importantly, yourself, demonstrates maturity and confidence. It sends a message that your sense of worth is not dependent on their response, but is rooted in your own self-awareness and self-love. In some cases, the absence of closure is an opportunity for growth. It challenges you to confront uncomfortable emotions, build resilience, and develop a deeper understanding of yourself. It forces you to practice acceptance and adapt to uncertainty, skills that are invaluable in all areas of life. While it may not feel like it in the moment, the experience of moving on without closure can be a transformative one, strengthening your ability to navigate future challenges with grace and courage. Moreover, letting go of the need for closure doesn't mean suppressing your emotions or pretending the situation doesn't affect you. It's about acknowledging your feelings, processing them in a healthy way, and then choosing to move forward. This process might involve journaling, seeking support from trusted friends or a therapist, or engaging in self-care practices that help you reconnect with yourself. By taking these steps, you honor your emotions without becoming consumed by them. Lastly, the absence of closure is a reminder of the impermanence of human connections. Not every relationship or interaction is meant to last forever, and that's okay. Some people come into our lives to teach us lessons, challenge us, or help us grow, and their departure is simply a part of that journey. Recognizing this can bring a sense of peace and acceptance, even in the face of unanswered questions. And here is the truth.